Welcome to the Wake Up Dad Show, a Daddiest production. This podcast is for you, Dad. This is where we talk about all things related to dadhood, from parenting to relationships to financial and physical health. Your hosts, Dr. Scott and Dr. Evan, are two dads who are committed to helping you. Join our Facebook community by searching Daddiest, where conscious dads connect and collaborate. Hey, dads. Welcome to another episode of the Wake Up Dad Show. I'm your co-host, Dr. Evan. I got with me Dr. Scotty V. How's it going, Scott?
Pretty good. Beautiful day over here as usual. You know, I always give a running commentary on the weather.
Always.
What was the weather today, Ev? What was the temperature? Do you know?
It was 26. The humidity is like 33 probably. It was steamy.
No, you beat me.
Steamy.
It's 24 at the moment.
Yeah,
but
in your winter time.
But it's the middle of the winter, so.
And you're wearing the exact same clothes as me. All right, Dad. So if you're listening to this on our podcast, you can watch it live in the Daddiest group, which is just hopping. We're just at 700 dads right now. So you can join the group and see our pretty mugs on there. We are very excited about the guest we have with us today. This is Beth Ostrander. Beth is a pleasure coach. And Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so a little bit about Beth's background. So Beth was an accountant actually prior to becoming a pleasure coach. And I guess she just, I don't know, as we were talking in the pre-show, like how hot is accounting when you balance the budget? It's hot.
Really, really, really hot.
There would be so much pleasure in accounting that maybe they should start calling accountants pleasure coaches.
Wow, that could be a thing. Not at all, but
not
yeah.
at all.
Like PA at the end of it. Like CA and PA.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so she is a speaker. I actually got to see her speak at a masculinity summit here in Toronto. She's a facilitator and a coach, and really worked through her upbringing in a religious home where there was confusing messages around pleasure and intimacy, and I think I can speak for myself. Like, I don't even know what messages I got from my home. I think there's all kinds of weird messages that come from our home, and we sometimes we just have to become conscious of what we learned, because we might not even know what we learned until we get a little bit down the road. And so her goal really now is to support others to reawaken their passions, move beyond inhibitions, and create an intimate life full of pleasure, which is a big part of what we're focusing on in Daddiest. So she has become a trained professional coach with International Coaching Academy and a certified erotic blueprint coach. And her life of pleasure includes laughter with her daughters, music and dancing, and of course, soulful, satisfying intimacy with herself and her loved one. So we're going to get right into it. So we have a cohort of dads that are mostly in the range of age 30 to 50, with the mean being about 40 years old. So to paint a picture, the majority of dads have young kids, most of them, and have gone through those stages of obviously dating, marrying, having kids, and they're probably in a lot of them are both parents are working, or we do have some dads that are single dads, even busier. So our goal here is to create some value for dads to really see, because intimacy can change with the different seasons, stages of being a dad, being married, all these different things. And for a lot of dads, they're finding less connection, less intimacy as the busyness increases, and are trying to figure things out. So they're looking at things like the love languages and doing all this. So let's just open up the conversation. What's happening out there?
Yeah, I love that we get to talk about this, especially with dads, because it's so often missed. So I love that you're listening and you're tuning in. We were talking in the prep about men taking inventory. In fact, you guys are a bunch of conscious men taking inventory of your lives. Awesome. And you're likely taking inventory of how much sex you're getting, having, enjoying. I had a client who actually told me about an Excel spreadsheet he had tracking the number of times that he would have sex. And I'm like, please don't show your wife that. And of course he did. And so that was really great for a good session. That was a fun session. But it was cool because that did increase later. So at least he felt good. He kept tracking it. So, and I, as an accountant, I mean, when you mention Excel, I'm kind of excited. I was kind of impressed. Yeah, but I do find that what happens in these stages after parenting kind of takes hold, it's a lot of what I hear is I'm hearing from both sides. I work with both the men, women separately and then together at times, right? And so I'm hearing that, wow, sometimes the conversation isn't even happening anymore about sex, let alone the act of sex. It's gotten kind of difficult to even do that because there's a lot of rejection. I hear it's frustrating to approach it because there's rejection, or there's this like anger or confusion, or there's pity sex afterwards, and that's gross to some people. Perhaps not everyone. I loved our pre-show talk. And then like kind of like the basic, like sometimes you're just talking logistics and strategizing around how to be good parents. And so the time together is sucked up in the practicalities, and there's not a lot of play. There's not a lot of ease. And I remember, I think it was a couple of weeks ago in my men's group that a dad just was like, it used to be so easy. Like I actually knew how to do this, and now I have no clue. That's how it feels. So,
do you think he was referring to like getting his wife to like have sex with him, like that part?
Oh,
or just the actual act?
Oh no, that's a good question. Okay, so straight talk, because that's what I love about men, is that I get the privilege to just go right to it. It's so much. I love it. Thank you for existing, men. And so it's
You're welcome.
Convoluted. Okay. Anyway, so two things. It was two things. It's like, how do I get her in agreement was the big it. I don't know how to do that anymore. It really wasn't a thing before. It was so easy and natural, and it would just happen. And so the skill set has completely changed to get it even to be a possibility, and that she wants it. Like there's a lot of dutiful kind of actions happening in some cases, or no actions happening. And then the irony of it is, I don't know about the two of you, and I maybe someday I'll have a chance to poll all your guys, because that'd be super cool. But most of us, if we were lucky enough to get sex ed in school, we did not learn how to do it pleasurably. We didn't learn about pleasure. We learned about maybe a safety, maybe the whole banana thing, right? I don't know about you. That was my sex ed thing, condom on the banana, right? In some awkward classroom. And
that's awkward. That's awkward. That's so awkward.
Like so confusing, actually. Like, is that what?
And then every time you go grocery shopping from then on, you're looking at a banana, and it's like you're imagining back in high school.
Anymore. You can't eat it. You gotta crack it off and just eat the little piece. You can't eat a banana anymore, right? You just can't do it.
No.
Or once you've done your sex journey, you can actually find pleasure in eating a banana. There's the other side of it. So and yeah, go please. I see Dr. Scotty. Is that what I get to call you? You were saying something. That was way more funny.
No. But, no, definitely just Scott.
Okay. Okay, I thought you were going to say something. Anyway,
no.
So
what were we talking about? Awkward? What was awkward? Was there an awkward silence? Talking about bananas? I don't know.
Awkward. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of what goes on there, and there's so I was going to say, so there's this lack of also knowing what to do, and ironically, that's like a thing that people think they should know, the skill set. Like I should know technically how to actually do this. And yes, that's true. But ironically, let's think about this. If you could actually create a conversational or like a dialogue, and it doesn't have to be talking all the time, so don't worry, but if you could communicate about sex with ease with your partner, you don't actually have to know all the shit. You actually just need to know how to know all the shit together and discover. And part of the fun is discovering together. So I think there's this misconception that, oh, I better go learn how to do this, and then it's gonna all work out. Oh, then my wife will want to do it with me. It's probably not the thing. It's probably not what's worrying her. And it is part of the thing. Like, for sure, don't get me wrong. If she's not feeling pleasured, there's going to be a problem. So I actually would love to chat a little bit about the erotic blueprints a bit, because that I hope to shed a little bit of insight, because sometimes what's one person's pleasure and turn on is not the other person's.
So you said about, well, maybe if I learn it first, then it's like, how do you learn it then? Like, you talking about watching porn?
Good question.
But
that's actually what most people would go to. Yeah, that's like, it's a common thing. And then that becomes a divide between the partners, because then the woman feels like she's not good enough. Like, there's like, this, I'm telling you, is like a minefield. This whole conversation, we could go down so many threads and tracks. Some people feel like, as a couple, if they're even having the conversation, if you go do a workshop and you learn how to do a good blowjob, the men are thinking, yes, go to that workshop, that it's going to solve everything. No. I mean, there's good things about that. Trust me.
You said you're providing links, right? Is there
Yes.
This is like,
is there an online course? Because I'm in Australia. Is that a thing?
Is it global? Is this a global thing?
Does it involve bananas?
I should just do a whole course on banana. No, banana sex. It's just where my mind went. No, don't do that. Stop me from that.
Okay, so I like this point, though, the idea of exploring it together and setting up that, like, it's like a collaboration. You're working together as a team to explore, to learn, and it's like having that dialogue. But then there's the thing, like, well, it actually has to happen in a way. Like, there's got to be some framework created. Either you're in the bedroom and you are like in the moment, and then having some communication, like, oh, do you like that? Or, have you ever wanted to try this or whatever? It's a little bit easier when you're in the moment, I think, anyway. And then, but like when it's in that space where maybe it's a kind of a distant thing, where maybe it hasn't been happening very often, or it has been happening, but it's mechanical, and there isn't that, like, the spice there for one of the partners or both the partners. Then what? Like, how does, let's start with that group, because I think the group that is having is actually having it, and they can have a dialogue. Maybe they could take from this part over here.
Yeah.
And I think these guys are the ones that probably really need the help. So let's go with that.
I love it, because honestly, I feel like that's my favorite people. Like, that was me. I was that people. 12-year marriage, not going well, but it didn't go well from day one, because we didn't know how to converse about it. So it was like a downhill. And then the kids came, and again, like, logistics took over, and So
can we, just before we dive in, what does not conversing about it look like? Like, is it like there's an attempt and then it doesn't go anywhere? Like, is it like what kind of stuff? How do we know when when we suck at the conversing part side of it?
I really love that. That's so it. What are the indicators this is not going well? Tell me.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So one is she's not laughing.
At all?
Well, like, if you're having a conversation about sex and it's not feeling playful to her, it's usually feeling stressful.
I thought you meant just laughing in general. Like,
I'm glad you specified that, Scott.
Yeah, no,
that's a really good point. Exactly. Well, it's actually part of it. If you're not, so it's like triaging. I just realized, oh my God. So if you're not laughing, there's something going on. Agree. Like that, like there's something to look at. And sometimes sex is the thing and sometimes other things are the thing, but sex is always a part of the thing. Sex is so important in relationships and it's just so underplayed. And I think unfortunately, society, women, we bought into this a lot and we can shame men a lot. And actually, what's the word? Like, consider there's some philosophies out there, right? Some underlying beliefs of culture and that we've bought into that men want sex just to like get off and it doesn't mean something more. Sex means a whole lot to a man. Oh, in the pre-show, we were talking about, well, sex leads to intimacy or is intimacy leading to sex? Like there's these perspectives that people, like those are good questions to ask your partner. Do you think intimacy leads to sex or does sex lead to intimacy? Like that would be really, really foundational to understand about each other. But again, don't start your conversation there. So back to the laughter. Honestly, if you look back to when it was going with ease, there was a lot of fun. There was a lot of play. There was a lot of curiosity. There was a lot of, I don't know you, but I kind of want to know you. In fact, I really want to know you. And I know everything about you. And even if you're an insane human, I still want to know you. Oh my God. So that when that starts to go away, those are like, or dwindle or not happen as often. In general, that's an indicator that your intimacy is going downhill. If you're trying to actually have conversations about sex, which, you know, people don't often do it. Some guys will be like, hey, can we do it tonight? Like that might be the extent of the conversation. And that might work. And again, what's that?
How's that going for you?
It might work with certain people because there is a type. So there's 5 types and there is a type that's what's typically called sexual, and it's called sexual, who want to get right to it. Don't bother. Don't waste my time about this. And some women are sexual. We assume all men are sexual and it's not the case. So for some that actually might work. And for others, it will be a big giant disaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers it. It's a touch on what you're asking, if the conversation is going well.
Yeah, it's good. And okay, so you touch on something that I think I just want to dive a little bit more into, and it's like the social buy-ins around sex. So, and how, so there's some men I know in my life, and one of the kind of, it's a joke, but it's not a joke. It's not funny at all. I don't find it funny. He doesn't find it funny.
This clone of you doesn't find it funny. We've lost. That was awesome.
Sorry. There's back. And that is that, you know, the joke is that anytime he wants to have sex, he's got to take his wife on a vacation.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Got to take his wife on vacation every single time he wants to have sex. So he's like literally having a ridiculous amount of vacations, and you know, they're
funny, not really, funny. Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and he like, so there's that part of it. It's like, I don't know, it's like taking her out of her space where there's a lot of stress and distractions, and I think that's part of it. Then there's the other type where it's like sex is like it's like a reward for being good and doing everything that you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, like there's that, and I know of other, it's like you've checked all the boxes, and all the boxes in our life is checked. Like the floors are clean, the dishes are done, you've shaved, you had a shower, I look good, I had my hair done yesterday, and like all that. And then, okay, now we can have, and it's like all the planets and the universe just aligned, and then bam. Like there's that too.
It is a thing. And I find even with that, I've never heard the whole vacation thing. That doesn't surprise me, but no one's shared that with me. But the thing you're talking about, like, okay, I've done everything. I've done it all. It's all been done. And then when I don't get it still, or it's begrudging, like that even happens. And there's this kind of seething, and this goes on for time after time. There becomes a seething frustration. And it truly, I mean, you guys are talking here, this is a conscious group of men. It is attacking your whole being. Like it is, it undermines you. It's going to impact how you show up at work. It's going to impact how you show up as a man. It's going to impact you. And yeah.
It's kind of like, so, I mean, we've had periods in our relationship where, you know, like there's been time, like there's been like a gap of time. And I remember like it happened and it was like, my life's complete. Like, I feel like literally life is complete. Like everything else is good, you know? And it's that connection. It's another level of connection and knowing like that part of my life is there. Because without it being there, it's a huge void. It's like an abyss of, like, you know, that it can't be filled by anything else other than that. And so it's like, relationships can be playing out in many different ways, where maybe sex is being used as a way to get what they want, or there's got to be a lot of strategies involved to get to it. So how would you, like, you were talking about this erotic blueprint. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that could maybe help men, help dads?
Yeah. But I'm realizing, if we're talking to the man, if we're going to go to that point of man, okay, because there's a bunch of you listening. And so I want to first address the man who's in the relationship where it hasn't been happening for some time. And conversation is either volatile, like, so there's silence periods after, or there's, you know, shouting, screaming matches, or there's just no conversation anymore, right? I want to talk to them first, because if you jump to the erotic blueprints, there's something you kind of need to set the stage for yourself. Otherwise you'll get tripped up into like, why isn't this working? And this can happen like along the way too. So this is good for everybody here listening. But if someone jumps too early and they're in that kind of like that place, it can be really, really, you don't want to add more frustration to that scenario. So a couple of the key pieces of information I share with everyone. I even share this with single people because there's a big misunderstanding. What you said is bang on. What you're talking about, like, if this piece is missing for you, for me, for each of us, if this piece is missing, there's a gap, there's a hole. And sexual pleasure is a part of who we are as humans, to be vibrant humans. Like, passion is passion. And erotic passion is a part of all your passion. So when part of your passion is not happening, there's like a shutdown. There's a depression of passion everywhere. Like, it is interconnected. It's connected to your creativity. It's connected to your life force. So that's really, really critical. And therefore, this is huge. And I literally say this for about 3 months before someone starts to connect with it. So I'm going to say it. So you might want to write this down, because you won't believe me and you'll be like, whatever. But our sex life is actually, when we're in relationship, there's 3 sex lives going on. And I think I talked about this at the masculinity thing, although that was quite a funny experience, by the way. So I had a freak out moment on stage. Anyway, okay, so there's 3 sex lives going on. It's yours, because your sex life, I take an expansive look at sex life. Your sex life is your relatedness to your body and how you relate to the world in your body. It's your body pleasure. So when you were born until you're dying, you yourself have a relationship to your body. And before you met your partner, you were even having a sexual relationship with your body. Okay, so it's really important to know that that's still there. That's still happening. And she too has the same thing going on, or your partner too also has the same thing going on. They've had a relationship, okay? And then you've created a joint one. And so why I say that as such an important thing is the second part is we're mostly starving, hungry. And we come into that joint journey like ravenous wolves who are literally like trying to gnaw at their own like flesh because they're that starving. And you don't behave well when you're like that. You behave with a different way of behaving. And so when you come to approach your partner looking for sex and you're not at some level of satisfaction, you're coming in a way that is actually feeling yucky to the woman, to the partner. Okay. So I want to say that up front, because we can talk about erotic blueprints for sure. But if you have, you kind of have to check in on your level of frustration. I usually do a check-in. I'll be like, okay, what are you from 1 to 10 today? Are you at like a 10? I'm like dying for sex. I'm dying for contact. Or, and then I'll check in with the woman if she's on the flip side, because it goes both ways, where the woman is ravenous. Okay. But I check in with the other person, and what is your level of annoyance? And that's how they approach that. There's a register of annoyance and wanting space to breathe and be themselves. So there's like these two flip sides. Okay. So then that's all I'll say about that for now, because that's a whole thing. So once you've navigated and so the erotic blueprints will help you to actually start to take ownership of your pleasure. So we can talk about that. But I don't know if you want to like relate to that, or what are your thoughts on that? Is this something that you're like, oh, of course I knew that. That's not news.
Well, I like.
My thought is around. So if you are wanting to start that conversation, you probably want to check in with yourself and make sure you're like a 2 or a 3 on that 10 scale before you start a conversation, and not be like, all right, I'm getting to a 7, I'm getting to an 8, I'm getting to a 9. Oh, I really need to have this conversation now.
Yes. Which actually happens in any kind of topic, actually. When you're saying it like that, I really appreciate that. It's like if you're agitated about some topic, it could even be something at work or something around the kids or whatever. You get to an agitation point, you're not going to have the same quality of conversation about it. If you're feeling sexually frustrated, you're going to have a different conversation as if you feel sexually satisfied.
That's I think a good practical point for dads out there, is to have that sort of introspection and go, all right, well, I'm a 2, I'm a 3 now. I can have a logical, or logical might not be the right word when we're talking about sex and intimacy and pleasure, but logical is more accounting. But anyway, the other part to it is, you mentioned earlier about conversations, and you said, and I don't know if this will fit in here or a bit later or not at all, but you said some of them can be verbal, but there's the non-verbal.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that'll fit in when we do. Good. I'm glad you asked that, because quite frankly, sometimes there's too much talk. Yep. Right? And so the less talk.
We dads love that. Keep going. Keep talking.
Right, exactly. And I have to slip this in. Women, there's so much I would love to share, but this is really actually another key thing. Women, the more they can be like their wild, erratic self, which we're really good at being this, okay? Now, they don't get to be, I'm going to take full ownership here. I'm going to talk about me so that I can own it, all right? And we women, I am highly passionate, and I can feel my feelings big time. And that includes like a wrath, an anger. And that used to get directed. First of all, it got directed at me inward, which meant depression. And then when that started to lift, it got directed at my then husband in a big, disrespectful, horrible way, right? And that sometimes is where we stop as women. We women, if they can spend time with their girlfriends, that is good for your sex life. If they're good girlfriends, meaning they can hear that and they're not like, it's not a bitch fest, okay? But if they can get the wrath out, and if you can allow the wrath to just, if it starts bubbling up, if you can learn, it's like almost like get your game stance on and you can learn how to like weather the wrath. I want you to get this. It's like so tied in. The more she can allow her authentic wrath and fury to rise up, that's passion, equaling erotic passion. It's like the pathway to passion. Most women were told to not get angry and don't be a slut. And they weren't spoken like that, obviously, but we got the message loud and clear. So when a woman can be honored and like actually kind of admired for her level of fury, and my wonderful man told me the difference between chaos and drama. When we can allow when you guys can allow a space to be chaotic and like all that amazingness, and you kind of like, wow, you're like amazing, like, oh my gosh, life altering. Now the drama and like the blaming and the attacking no, you get to like say, no, I'm going to put my gloves up here. That doesn't get to be at me. You can be all that, but that doesn't get to be at me. That leads to her to awaken her sexual passion. So I had to throw that in there. Okay.
Yeah, that's just like want to add on to that. So that's key, because you know, we've talked a lot about the feminine, you know, the feminine woman, and you know, a man that can like stand there like a rock and allow, like, be able to receive his woman and all the range that she has, then she can actually provide the whole range.
Hell
And
yes, that's it.
and come with the whole range, and that's going to show up in a different way in the bedroom, than if you're only allowing like this much range and keeping things really like tight. And I love how you said that, like, it stops here though, like when it starts, you know, the blame and the, you know, tearing you down or whatever, where you can kind of be like, okay, like, it's okay, you're doing all that thing, but you know, like, we are a team, and it's about empowering each other, not taking each other down, like having some sort of a that's really like a value set, and breaching a value between each other. Hopefully you've got values in your relationship. So I love that point. And yeah, let's get in. Okay, so
let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Erotic blueprints. Woo! Okay. So if you know love languages, it's a typing system. It doesn't mean you're boxed in for life for this. In fact, there's a theory that you can actually access all of it. It's just as you start to dive into this more, you'll see that you'll find your ways. Like I actually like to consider it like, I love that you're from Australia, because I like to consider it like the continents. Okay. You're here now, but this is going to give you access to where you can go, because so often, again, like I said, we didn't learn pleasure. We did not learn pleasure. So there's 5 pleasure types. And one of the guys, he came with his wife to my workshop. I do workshops here in Toronto, and around Toronto. And he did this, he midway through the class, he's like, raises his hand and he's like, are you saying this is like the key to turning my wife on? And she's right there. And I'm like, yes, that's actually what it is. And so these types, and I'll go into them for a minute, but these types, they aren't that you can't access all of them. It's that this is you have a primary that is that initial turn on, which will allow you to start going into the others. Okay. So 5 types. There's energetic. I'll come back around. And that one is the least known. Okay. Energetic. There's sensual. There's sexual, which is what we typically consider as sexual pleasure. Okay, that's kind of the norm, quote unquote. There's kinky. And kinky is a little bit complex in that there's a kinky that is only the psychological, meaning, and sorry, I should say this. Kinky is, everybody has their own version of kinky. It's about what is your edge. You like playing up against your edges, and it's very exciting. The naughty ideas are exciting and fun to you. And there are those that like the psychological idea of it. They'll never follow through. It's not that if they can't or whatever, it's just not their pleasure. And then there's the one who's more the tactile, and they actually like the doing of it and going through with it. And then 5th is the shapeshifter, and I like to call it the chameleon. So the shapeshift, so where everyone else, other than the shapeshifter, they have a particular key to turn on the ignition, okay? The shapeshifter actually can be turned on in all 5. So they're kind of like, and the theory that I'm toying around with is that actually everyone has the shapeshifter capacity. We're just starting where we're starting.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. And each of these types has a shadow side, meaning it's kind of when it's off and there's something to look at and deal with. Okay. And then there's a pleasure place, which if you're in the sweet spot, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to be enjoyable that way. So, and I'll go through it briefly because then we can discuss it a little bit more. So I'll just say a few of each. Energetic, often, and I just want to say this in particular, because this is one of the most unknown. An energetic pleasure type often will show up like, people will say to me, I think my wife is asexual. I think she actually has no desire, period. And she thinks so too. And what the fuck? Whatever. What can I do? Like, I'm lost. Like, what do I do? She's my person. And so they often are just energetic. And so the energetic, actually, part of their pleasure is enormous amounts of space, physical, time-wise. They love anticipation. And there's something ethereal about them, meaning they love connecting to the mysterious of life. They They may use different words depending on, you know, their belief systems and all of that, but they will connect like the universal kind of ideas. They could even be the religious type. They could be the spiritual type. That's part for them. That's actually part of sexuality. And so they love to connect. They love to be in conversation, to connect human to human, soul to soul. And if that's lacking, that is a turnoff. So in their shadow, if you touch them too soon, too quick, total turnoff. In fact, they may even disassociate from their body. They may literally be so agitated by it that they can't even be present with you. Sometimes this person has had some trauma in the past, and so it shows up in this way. So they also, they're pretty judgy when it comes to people who like sex just for sex. Because they're like, if this is not like a soul-based thing, if you're not doing it to like connect and be like intimate and connect, like they'll be like, you're gross, and like they'll be kind of judgy about it. So that can be in the shadow side. And if you do not have any concept of foreplay, like they're like, you are an imbecile, you have no clue. Like, so there can be that, right? So that's the energetic. Oh my gosh, big thing is they can orgasm without touch. Like they can orgasm at looking at a tree. They can orgasm like ridiculous amounts of capacity around orgasm. So very, very cool when
so I
someone
want to learn how to do that.
Right? Can I do that? And that's so cool. And by energetic, it's not like that they've got a lot of energy. They're actually in tune with energy in life. Like not everyone like speaks this language, but it's like we're all based in energy. We're all, you can feel a vibe when you come into a room. They're very in tune. They're very in tune with people's vibes, and they're highly intuitive generally. And sometimes they get exhausted because they take on people's vibes.
I'm guessing the guys that are married to the energetic ones, they know they're married to the energetic ones.
Well, in this moment, they're like, right? Oh my God.
They're like, yeah.
Sexual. Oh my God.
Ring the bell.
Yeah, there's a lot of marriages where this piece is why I spent a little more time on it, because it's one of the missing links.
I know one for sure. Like as you're talking, I'm like, I know I've got a friend, and this is his wife, 100%.
Yeah.
It's challenging for him. Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anymore, which is what's super cool about it. So, okay, second one is sensual. Sensual is kind of what it sounds like. They're very turned on by their senses. So they love music. They love to dance. This is in their pleasure zone, okay, when it's all tickety-boo working well. So they're the type of person who will like make noises of pleasure when they're eating. They will, as a shadow, because we can often see our pleasure type or our partner's pleasure type in the shadow description. Okay. And so the sensual will often be in their head a lot. That's a big common one where they can't get out of their head. They're thinking about everything. In the bedroom, it's showing up like there's a smell that's off, the music cuts off, or is the wrong song. They're kind of divas or devos, as I call it. Like they really, really do need the whole environment to be to their specifications. And once they can own that and start requesting it, wow, they can like be very sensual and pleasurable, and they can have amazing, expansive pleasure. And we were talking about bananas. Was that live or was that pre-show? I've lost track. But
I don't know. We tried to do this show so many times. I don't know what's what.
So there's good banana stuff. Good banana stuff.
I'm just going to interrupt for just 1 second on a completely separate topic. Yeah, I think we did so many takes and stuff. I'm down to 2% battery, so I may just drop out here any minute. And if I do, sorry about that, and keep going. And I can't wait to watch it.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I'll try to get through the types anyway then, because I could try to do that. The next one is sexual, which is kind of obvious, okay? It's kind of what we know as sex. They want to get right to it. Orgasm is the goal. They love things to be wet and messy. There's lots of sucking. There's lots of touching erogenous zones right away. Their shadow is, they don't understand why people have issues with sex. What is your problem? They also don't understand foreplay. Like, why would you waste your time? And this will show up in regular life too. They're like, let's get to it. Like they're kind of a let's get to it person. Okay. The fourth is the kinky. And I talked a little bit about the kinky. Kinky can get really misunderstood because you think it's like, you know, you're going to be in a dungeon or you're 50 Shades of Grey. It can be that, but it actually can be someone doing a new position. Like there was a 70-year-old couple that the person who created this, Jaya, she was coaching, and they came back to her and they realized they were kinky because they realized that they changed positions from missionary position, and they were like so terrified / excited. So it's really the person who finds it exhilarating to be on their own edge, and they get excited by it a lot. So the shadow side of the kink is they're the most prone to shame, because the very thing that they think is bad is the thing that turns them on. So they have the opportunity to process a lot of old baggage, actually. So for them, sex can be a very, very healing process. It can be for everybody, but if a kink really undertakes it, they have like the world's their oyster, because like pretty much anything could be kinky fun, right? But they also have an opportunity to work through a lot of shame. So, and then shapeshift. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
On that note, so how does somebody who's experiencing shame, and like, cause I could see that there'd be a lot of healing, you know, in that process of getting past that, but like, is that something that you do, like facilitate helping somebody through that?
I do, but my preference is really to teach individuals how to actually navigate that. We have to be self-responsible for our pleasure and our pleasure blocks. So I actually teach people a really simple couple methods how to do it. And then so you know, first of all, just to recognize it's shame coming up. It's not that you don't like it. It's just there's a block to your pleasure, right? Like, and so there's a recognition. So I train people how to do that. And then I also train, so that's one level, how to actually be owner of your own shame. And then I actually teach in a partnership kind of way, how do you deal with your own shit when someone else is dealing with their shame? Because it's like a ping pong thing. And this is so common, especially after you've been in a relationship for a long time. There's this dynamic. There's a lot of dynamics that get developed over time. And the shame thing, again, do you remember I started off? This is why I always go back to, you got 3 sex life journeys. So I will always pull them back to their own journey. And so when you can know that you can deal with your own shame, and you've learned how to actually be noticing, observing, and how to actually set it aside for the moment, know how to actually clear it when you need to, get the support you need to. And then you realize that if they're getting triggered, that's their stuff. They may be getting triggered because okay, I love that I'm talking to a group of men and that we talked about blowjob classes. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine that a woman, if you men are so lucky, is giving you a lovely blowjob. But what if you bump into a memory, like some scent, right? Memory gets triggered by scent. What if some trigger memory comes up of when you were a kid, and like either you got caught watching porn, or you got caught watching seeing a magazine about someone get a blowjob, and all of a sudden there's this tiny sliver of shame that pops into your brain. Okay, something goes on. You may literally do no communication other than some weird body jerk, or you might go flaccid. You go flat. And the woman, if you guys aren't actually clear that you guys are both on your own journey, if that happens and she's in the middle of something that for her is also very risky perhaps, or maybe she's fine with it, but she may take that personally. And then you've got 2 of you being in your shame show, shit show, right? And then no one's available for the other. Now that's so common. So common. And so I teach people how to actually own their own process, and how to then at the next level, how do you own when your other person is there? How do you actually do that well? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It actually can be the most, and let me just, on the other side, like when you can learn how to do that, like that's when intimacy can be built. When you're naked and someone can actually be cool with the fact that you just like went flaccid, and they're not taking it on as themselves, and they can be there and be like, oh my God, you're like the most amazing man ever. Or the woman is afraid because she spread her legs, and all of a sudden she's afraid she is smelling. And it gives her all her history of her mom saying, don't this, blah, blah, blah. And you can just say, oh my God, you're beautiful. and you're not taking it personally, what builds up is this insane level of trust and intimacy that leads to sex, that leads to intimacy, that leads to sex. Like, it's quite brilliant. Okay. Sorry, off on a.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good stuff. And so then the last one was the shapeshifter.
The shapeshifter. Oh my gosh. Okay, shapeshifter is like super cool. Shapeshifter is like a bit of a sex nerd, actually. So not only can they have a turn on in each of the other types, so they can get revved up sexually in each of the other types, they also just love the topic of sex, and they can see how sex interconnects with life. So they tend to talk about sex a lot, even besides the fact of wanting sex. And they want sex, and they want it all, and they want it more, and they would like it again and more. Okay, so that's the shapeshifter. And one of their shadows is they feel like they're too much. They've actually for a long, long time felt like they're too much. And it may show up as if they feel like they're too much in other areas of life, as well as in the bedroom and around their desires. They also can be highly starving, more so than the others. They're more prone to starving because shapeshifter can, first of all, is very hungry, okay, has a capacity for a lot of sex, more than the sexual even, okay? And because they often are a chameleon, if their partner happens to be a sensual, which is fairly common for women, or at least where they feel like comfortable and acceptable to be in that zone, then they're always getting fed in their sensual type, but they're never getting fed in the energetic, the kinky, the sexual. And so they're still left starving. And the wife's like, I actually give you a lot of sex. Like, what the fuck? Like, and that's what I end up getting. Cause she's like, but she doesn't have a space to talk about that because she's committed to you, but she's like, I feel not enough woman. And so then another dynamic builds. So shapeshifters, especially when they're coupled up with someone who's a sensual or an energetic, there can be this really interesting / confusing dynamic. So those are the types. Yeah.
So dads listening to this right now, taking inventory, because you might be like looking at your relationship and going, okay, like I totally get like which one my wife is. Holy crap, I wish she was this one. Or maybe you're totally happy with the one she's at, or you know which one she's at and it's completely not working and you have no clue how to like access that. So, I mean, for the ones that it's working for them, awesome. Yeah. Way to go. And
like awesome, like for real, like kudos to them, because that's it's actually rare, awesome. To be honest.
Yeah. So I want to bring this up because I mean, everybody, it's very hard not to compare. It's very hard not to compare, right? And I'm a part of a number of dad groups, and I'm looking at conversations. Of course, there's dads that throw up like some post and it's about like how often do you have sex? And so there's guys putting on there like, what's sex? Like they're like, honestly, like maybe once a month, maybe 12 times a year, maybe 6 times a year. Then there's other dads that are like, if I'm not getting it every day, there's something wrong. And I think this helps explain that like we're all different. And for some people, like 7 days a week is the number for them. And then other people, it is actually going to be a lot less. And it's not just the woman. It's not just the woman that's dictating how often. Like there's guys in these groups that are the energetic, and that it's for them, it's not going to be frequent, and they don't want to have it frequently. So that conversation about it being frequent, looking like, oh, my life isn't right because I'm not having it often. That's not at all correct, because it's really about having sex as often as what works for you, what feels like it's right for you. And for the energetic person, they're really going to be tuned in when it's right. And the person that is, say, the sexual person all the time may seem right. And so that's the part that we have to understand. But if, like, let's say I'm energetic and I'm with a woman who's sexual, I'm going to lose my marbles. Yeah. Like, it's going to be hard unless I figure out some way to make that work.
Yeah.
And for that dialogue to happen. So, I think a lot of men really put the, it's the conversation about whether the woman's putting out or not. And I think part of it is also taking responsibility for like, where are we coming to, like you were saying, like, what's our relationship to sex for real? Like, let's not just pretend that like it is about the most, the most frequent wins the prize. It's not that way. It's really about connecting in this space in the way that really works for us, is what I'm understanding.
Well, I'm going to say this because I can almost hear people groaning. I groan at someone telling me I don't get as much pleasure as I want. I won't get as much sex as I want. Click, done. Like, so I want to clarify this. Well, not clarify. I want to invite you to expand the idea of what is erotic pleasure. And like, again, I really, really, like, I have a dream of actually shifting the coming of age journey, because clearly had we learned about these pleasure types back in the day in some way that was appropriate for kids, okay, all that good stuff. But we wouldn't be assuming that our count, our Excel spreadsheet of sex meant we orgasmed, or our partner orgasmed, or we had actual interaction of some sort, whether it's blowjob or you're in each other in some way, or there's a toy played with. Like, if you're marking the boxes based on that, it may or may not add up to what you want. But when you expand erotic pleasure to the full capacity of what it is, that's a whole different story. There's a theory out there, which I think is pretty awesome, is that there's a state of orgasm constantly available to us. We just need to tap into it. And the more I do this work, I'm really, really I'm a total experimenter, okay? I love experimenting with ideas. And I'm like, okay, maybe, and maybe not, but now I'm up for the challenge. So I've been experimenting with me and with my clients. I've got to, always me first. I've got to own my own level of erotic pleasure, and I've got to own my level of pleasure in life. A lot of people who are registering as not satisfied in sex are actually also not satisfied in their whole life. So you got to check out all the areas for pleasure, which will take a little bit of the ease off of sex. And then when you really look at erotic blueprints and understand your type, and you start to find ways to give yourself erotic pleasure, and I'm not talking just a quick jack off, because that's at a, talk about stages. That's at like a stage. Yes, that's good and it's important. But there's another level where you can actually find pleasure in your own body. And when you do that, again, it's vitality. They talk about there's the Tao method of sex. And it's like, your vibrancy as a human is tied in to your erotic pleasure. If you're single, or let's say your partner's incapacitated, are you going to require sex from them so you can have your vibrancy? Or are you going to start taking ownership that you actually have the capacity to give yourself erotic pleasure? It is a total counterculture. Like, it's all about, we want to get in relationships so we can have sex. A lot of single people, I've talked to them about, oh, would you like to work on your pleasure life? I don't have a sex life. Or I'll say sex life, whatever. I don't have a sex life. It's such a societal concept that our sex life is only in relationship. And so I'm constantly peeling apart. You have your own sex life, completely separate from someone else engaging. I'll say it like this. This is me. I am on this journey with all of us, right alongside. I was starving sexually. I came out of a marriage where it was not working well. I was like ravenous. And then I got into another really, really cool relationship, beautiful relationship. And I screamed at this man because he's an energetic. And I didn't understand the blueprints at that time. I was one of those women in bed, so furious. And I was yelling at him. That was so ineffective just to make
that didn't work with you, energetic.
It didn't.
Shocking.
I don't understand. Shocking. Yeah. And so I then went on a journey, because this man mattered enough to me that I'm like, wait a second. Okay. And then my solving brain went, and then gratefully I found the erotic blueprints. And so I discovered who I was and my type. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. Is it actually possible that I can completely satisfy myself and everything with my partner is bonus? wouldn't I then come from a place of gratitude, a place of like ease and comfort? And then everything is like, oh my gosh, this is even more. How bonus is this? This is something that, and it's showing up as possible, and it's showing up as possible in my clients. And it's insane because we were never taught about how to actually just own our pleasure.
So yeah, I really like this because it's really giving people permission to have that, like you said, that sex life with themselves, and that's an important element of actually, like you were saying, you know, if you're going to come into the conversation and you're frustrated, it's probably going to not go well. Like it never looks good if you're frustrated or desperate. You know, if you need something like that's just, like you said, you're going to get the pity sex or like the handout, and like nobody wants that. Like guys feel that. So, but you know, I don't think really, my feeling is it's like society doesn't really, that's not really accepted in society that you're like, I mean, I've never heard anybody talk about it like you just did, actually, now that I think about it, where it's, you know, it's just a given, like you're having a sex life with yourself, and it's a requirement, like it's part of life, and you came into this relationship with a relationship with yourself, and so did the other person, and it's going to be important, probably lifelong, I'm guessing, that relationship that we're having with ourselves. And I like what you said as well, because like you talked about pleasure and how we gain pleasure from different areas in our life. You know, we're getting pleasure from different areas in our life. And that's important because it takes the pressure off of pleasure coming from just one place.
Exactly.
And it sounded to me like if we're having a life of pleasure, you know, like we're enjoying this part of our life and this part of our life and this part of our life, and then it takes the pressure off of sex so much, because like if sex is the only highlight in our life and we're not getting it, like the frustration is going to be through the roof. And if we have bought into that concept that like that, not having a sex life with ourselves, if we've bought into that not being okay, then it's going to be even worse.
Yes.
Right? Am I getting this? Am I an A student?
I love that you're getting it, because these are like tiny but really, really significant perspective shifts.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, you know, already, I think we've covered a lot of ground already, you know, looking at, you know, those concepts, I could see really making a difference. And, you know, I think part where one thing that I think maybe a little bit of a gap is, and you identified it right at the beginning, is there's the man and the woman, and they're just like, they're not really having intimacy together. And maybe like, this is my thoughts around it. So, we talked about like letting a woman be feminine, letting a woman, if she's a feminine woman, she's going to have range. She's going to like have a tornado in front of your face. And it's like, you know, we talk about it like the wind, you know, the wind can blow this way and that way. It's Mother Nature. And we're like the rock, and we're seeing this happen around us. And, you know, I can speak for myself. There's lots of times where it's, you know, if I'm stressed or I'm short for time or whatever, and I actually don't have the space for that at that moment.
Yes, this is a valid thing. Yes.
Yeah. So like life's busy, and you're like, you got like a project, whatever, you're like, you know, you're just finishing up and you got this thing and you're like, you got to get out the door or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like over there is when she's like going off, and it's like, right. And then it's like, my gosh, can't deal with this. Shut it down.
Yes. So common. So natural. Yes.
Yeah.
So what to do? Are you asking what the hell to do about this?
Well, I'm just saying, like, my experience is like the shutdown. Then you're like, because you've now just disallowed the expression. So
Yes.
you're so going the wrong way, and
Yeah.
it's
But
hard though. Like,
you've
huh?
contained things, and
You've
yet,
contained.
you've got to come, and
Oh,
later on, you're gonna have to work to
you're gonna have
uncontain
to.
things.
Yeah, it might take a week. It might take 2 weeks. If it's an energetic, it might take 3 months. Like, you know, if it's a
You're
sexual.
yeah.
Oh, I think I'm
Okay,
muted
so
somehow.
there's some
I'm muted.
like tiny little things, tiny little things that help with that.
Okay.
But I do want to acknowledge if your partner's not okay, there's like, okay, I'm going to back it up even further. There's something that when I see couples that I have to assess to see if it's worthwhile going on this journey. And one of them is, do you have enough, I don't know if the right word is respect. Do you have enough respect and value of one another left? Because I
That's
like, let's be
so
straight. Like,
so key.
yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. Where are you at in the relationship? You know,
yeah.
are
And
you
yeah,
just hanging on because of the kids?
which is it's a very true thing.
Common,
And you
but I
can
mean that's the point.
actually, exactly. And you can actually, here's the cool, I'm a bit of like, I love Disney, okay? I'm a bit of like a Pollyanna, and I like raise the flag. I used to like disown it, but no, like, here's why. I do believe in a little bit of magic, and I do believe we actually have a tremendous amount of power of influence. And I love that you're all dads, because I can speak to that. When we see our kids as their most amazing selves, what happens? They
Yeah,
walk into their most amazing self.
yeah,
They have nowhere else to go but to become their most amazing self. We all know parents could have been our own father who didn't see us as our most amazing self, and we either fought it and went downward, or we fought against it, right? It's
mm,
the same in any intimate relationship. If
mm,
you can literally make a choice to see your partner as her most amazing self, and you have to couple that with seeing yourself as your most amazing self. I'll tell my couples constantly, are you choosing you? Are you choosing her? And are you choosing us? Because if you're not choosing one of those, don't bother. And
mm,
I don't mean it like everything's rosy. You may feel shit about yourself. You may have lost your job, but you got to choose
mm,
that you're your best self. Okay, good. One step done. Are you choosing her? Okay, she seriously might be a disaster and really annoying, and like you might actually hate her a little bit. But
mm,
are you choosing her as her best self? Okay, good. Two. Now, are you choosing that you're going to do what it takes, and you may not have a clue what that is, but you're willing to find out what that is, and you're going to do the us? Are you choosing the us? And
mm,
you can't say that stuff to yourself enough, and you can't say that enough to her, because quite frankly, you're both terrified that the other person isn't choosing you. That's
mm.
generally, and you're like, I don't know, I don't want to go in, they're not going in, I don't know. And so then you're always kind of on the peripheral, and you got to deal with that stuff before you do anything naked. You got to deal with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Are you choosing you? Are you choosing her? Are you choosing us? I love it. That's a great. That's phenomenal. Um, and some of the things like in the Daddiest book, we talk a lot about some of the basic like fundamentals in relationship that leads to passion and intimacy, like basic things like listening, creating that space. It's like really creating a safe space for your woman to be able to express herself without judgment.
That's it. And so then let's tie
Like
that in,
that's
because you're
that's
a
key.
stormy person. Exactly. You're a stormy person. If you're not choosing her best self, and she's like has been, and you're tired, and you've got an assignment, like you have nothing left, you
Hmm.
need to get this thing done, or else like literally you may not be able to deal with some payments. And it's like,
Hmm.
it feels life or death, because it's kind of is, right? And,
Hmm.
and she's there doing her blow up, her emotional reaction to whatever. If you can actually like own that she's valuable and you're valuable at the same time, that conversation doesn't have to take long. In fact, and then there's kind of, and as you understand her pleasure type, you can actually find out what is it she needs. If she's energetic, do you need some space? Do you need some time? Let's figure out a way to get you some time. I can't do it, but I will make it happen for you. Let me get you some time. Let me get you some space. Let me get you some air. And so if you know her pleasure type is sensual, are you hungry? Like, can I feed you? Can I go get you something? Can I order something? Can I do that? What do you need? Is the house a disaster for you? Let me get that done. Let me go order someone in to come and do it. Let me get the kids to do it. Let me handle it. Like, and you do that. And it doesn't take much time. You can find a way to do it fast. If she's sexual, she might just need to, if she's open to it, just give her a quickie, right? And she may not be there. She might be in her shadow of sexual, okay? So then what's something she needs done quick? It could be work related. What is it? Do you need to vent? Like, do you just need to vent and scream and yell? I can do it for 5 minutes. Do you want that? Would that help you? So if you know her pleasure type, you can actually speak into it. If she's kinky, she might be dealing with some shame about a pleasure she has. So you can start to explore, like, what is it you really need? And I want to talk to you about that. So how can we set up a time for her to talk about that? And in the case where you do not have time, I highly encourage you to set up on a regular routine basis a way to support your wife to have good friends in her life. She will not allow herself that unless you encourage it in most cases. And if you can set up a regular routine where you've taken care of the kids, you've got it, and she gets that time with her girlfriends, oh my gosh, most of that will all be taken care of it. Okay, so those are just some thoughts. When everyone's energy is low, if you know the pleasure type, it helps. And if you can allow her permission to give herself pleasure, most women, they're not giving themselves permission for pleasure. So, and it doesn't take much time. Like, if you have the knowledge, the understanding of her. So, and I'm speaking her, this can be in same-sex relationships. It's not at all, it has nothing to do with him or her. So just throwing it in there, we haven't really addressed that.
Wow. Okay. So this is like phenomenal amount of stuff to absorb and to implement.
Yeah, no kidding. Good thing it's a recording.
It is. It's so good because there's so much. There's so many. This so gold. It's so gold. You know, and that piece that you just finished off there. You know, with what you can do to help, you know, support the different erotic
erotic blueprints. Yeah, erotic blueprints. Yeah.
And each category, what would you call it? Type? Pleasure type?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, how to support that pleasure type. And I think, you know, I think it helps the man brain, you know, to have some level of structure. And it's like, okay, there's this box, this goes in this box, this, like, it can't be like all this. It's got to be like box. Okay, do this. Yes. No. Over here. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God, I like it. Yeah, flow chart for this. That would be
flow
awesome.
charts. Okay. She says this. Do this.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Anyway, so, you know, thank you for being here, and so we will post. You have a 6-week course. We'll post, and you have your links and that sort of thing, you know, and you do coaching for men, for women, and as couples.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like we qualify, you know, we qualify, guys.
Yeah, you do.
Any one of us can work with Beth.
And I do want to say this, the 6-week course is designed for people who have zero time. So I've designed it very minimalistic.
Well done.
Most people don't have time to deal with pleasure.
Well done. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, you know what? I think that this passion, one of the P6 of Daddius, I mean, all of them are really super important. Yeah. Passion and intimacy, I think it adds such great depth and enjoyment to life. You know, it makes a lot of people feel alive.
Yeah.
And
I love your P, this power, because it totally actually is both. It feeds both your purpose, your power. Yeah. As well as your
it really just, you know, it really connects with the other elements of life. And so, yeah, this is actually a huge topic. I know we're going to go more into it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's continue this conversation. Thanks so much. Until next time. Thanks for listening. Remember, join our Facebook community, Daddius. where conscious dads connect and collaborate.